Welcome, Eric Riddleberger, to the Finding Elevation podcast. It's great to have you and to see you again. So, by way of background, we worked together through Alpine Athletics for several months to get you ready to trek. We thought first in Pakistan, but then it turns out you did the Snowman Trek in Bhutan with Mountain Madness. And when you got back a few weeks ago and we chatted, I was just really inspired by your experience, and it drove me to want to put Bhutan on my list of places to visit as well. And so I wanted to just share your experience with everyone listening today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm still really jacked about that trip.
Cool.
I'm happy to share what we did.
Well, let's start with imagine a lot of people have heard of Bhutan. Not a lot of people have probably been there. What drew you to this trek? And I know it was sort of a substitute for going to K2 base camp, but I think in the end, you probably are pretty happy that things turned out the way that they did. What drew you to Bhutan?
As you said, originally started out by working with you to train to go do the K2 base camp and Gondogoro La trek, but world events got in the way of that. I got really lucky because Ty and Mark at Mountain Madness reached out after they made the difficult decision to cancel the K2 trip and said, we've got this Bhutan Snowman Trek and we've got spots available if you want to go. So I immediately looked that up and two things occurred to me. One, I'm not sure I can do this. And two,
Gosh, that's so funny to hear you say that.
And two, I really want to do this. Just the description of what the whole trip entailed. The idea that you were going to go to a place that very few people go to, and you weren't just going to land, grab your stuff, and head out on the trail. You were really going to have an opportunity to travel around the country and get immersed in its culture and its people. And so that really intrigued me. I have lived and worked in Asia. I've been to a lot of countries there, but had never been to Bhutan. And so that really, really interested me and made the decision based on the conversations you and I spoke, because I reached out to you. You knew what I was doing to prepare for K2. So I also kind of asked the question, do you think I can do this?
Yes. So you were preparing for K2 base camp, which is an arduous trek for people who've trekked maybe to Everest base camp. Going to K2 base camp is nothing like that. There are no tea houses. You're walking on a glacier most of the time. It's very difficult. And you were mentally, I think, ready for that challenge. So what was it about when you did that initial study that made you think, oh, this might be a little more than I can do?
I think it was mainly as I read through it, the length of the time, the amount of time you were on the trail and how remote you got. I looked carefully at the K2 and, I wanted to do K2 because I'd done some reading a long time ago about the original American Alpine expedition in 1939 that just drew me in. I wanted to go to K2 base camp and I knew that was going to be hard, which is, why I tried to work so hard to get ready. And then when I had to shift that to Bhutan, I think it was just, I hadn't done as much thinking about it or as much research.
Right.
And then you do the Google search and it's like, Red Bull says Snowman Trek is the hardest trek in the world.
I think it does have that distinction. I've heard that as well.
Yeah. But I also learned just by doing it and having conversations with our guide that Bhutan specifically set the Snowman Trek up to attract adventure travelers and trekkers because they don't allow people to summit their high peaks because they consider them sacred. And they were looking for a way to open up the country to, as they call it, high value, low impact travel. They want people to come and understand how much they revere their country, their culture, and their outdoors. And so all of those things made me more committed to trying to do it. And luckily, because of when you do the trip, K2 base camp is typically in July and Snowman Trek is in October, I had a couple more months to get ready.
Right.
And I needed it.
Yeah. We'll get into training in a second. How many days was the trek? How many days were you on the trail? And give us a sense of what a typical day was like for people who aren't familiar with it.
Sure. So we were in country for, I think, about 25 days. We were on the trail for 18. That included 2 rest days. We were supposed to have 3, but weather early on forced us in a situation where we had to consume one of our rest days before we even got on the trail. And at the end of each day, and at the end of our first day, where we got to our tents and met all the staff and the team that were with us, one of the things that would happen is both the guide and the assistant guide would give us a preview of what tomorrow was going to be. They would tell us, okay, we're going to be doing 12 miles and 1,000 meters up and 1,200 meters down, and the highest altitude that we would get to. So they'd give us that background information so you could kind of mentally prepare for the day. And then I will admit, we went to bed immediately after that. So like 7:30, I was crawling into my sleeping bag and falling fast asleep because you were pretty knackered. I was getting up like 5:36 as soon as the sun was cresting. And then we always had a great breakfast to help get us powered up for the day.
Yep.
And then we did 20 minutes of stretching. We all got in a group. It was a small group of us. There were 8 of us in the group, and we had 2 guides, a cook, and 2 kind of general purpose assistants, and then 4 horsemen and their ponies. But we would get in a group with the 2 guides and the 8 of us, and we would stretch and basically get ready for the day.
And who was leading the stretching?
It was Titsum, our guide.
Okay, your guide.
He was great. Titsum and Jimmy, and we called him Jimmy because I don't think I would pronounce his name correctly.
And is that a normal Bhutanese way to begin your day with some stretching, or that was just his protocol?
I think it's his protocol, but he brought kind of Buddhism is the national religion of Bhutan. And for many of the Bhutanese, and for Titsum in particular, their religion, their faith is really, really important to them. And they shared that with us, which was really, really nice. I think he started each day stretching, so he included us in it. And it was great because it did get you limbered up before you left. And then we load up. We were carrying each day basically our immediate needs for that day. So we'd look at the weather. Every morning I had one of those Garmin InReach messengers that let me get, very localized weather forecast. It was terrific. We were lucky because after the rains at the start of the trip, we had sunshine until the end of the trip. So we never...
Unbelievable.
Yeah. We never had a day where we were rain or snow. So we were really lucky. So we would carry your water, extra clothing, your electronics, your camera, your phone, and that kind of thing. And everything else was managed by the horsemen and the ponies. And then we would set off on our trek. We would have one break before lunch, basically a short tea break and a snack if you brought power bars or anything like that with you. We had a hot lunch every day. I will admit that they did get to the point that they brought 2 chairs with the lunch pony, and me being the oldest person on the trip got to use one of those chairs. So I really did appreciate that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we'd have that lunch and then set off on our afternoon portion.
And what was a typical lunch like?
It was a hot lunch, rice, vegetables, and then some form of protein, chicken or beef, but plentiful rice, fresh vegetables. I probably ate more kinds of mushrooms than I've ever eaten before. And everything was delicious.
And great for you too.
Yes. Yeah. I ate like a horse. I mean, I ate everything I could to stay. And then we'd have a second break in the afternoon, kind of about halfway through. We typically would try to get to camp, between 3 and 5 p.m. Only once did we get to camp at close to sundown. The ponies would typically leave after us in the morning, but they would beat us to camp because those guys are quick.
Of course.
And camp would be all set up, and then typically have some tea, and then usually about 5:36 would be dinner. And again, we had hot breakfast, hot lunch, and hot dinners. And kind of the quality of the food, also the quality of all the support equipment, the tents, and everything was phenomenal. It was first class.
So good to hear.
And they would adjust their speed kind of to basically keep us together. And so for me, I preferred the uphills. The downhills were not hard. They were just tricky because you had to make sure you maintained your balance. And some of these downhills were really, really steep.
And it was Very rocky, right? Most of the
Yeah,
terrain.
it's a very narrow trail. It is rocky. And because we'd had rain early on, the first 3 or 4 days, really, really muddy. And then snow once we got above the snow line. But after that, it was mainly the rocks, and you just had to watch your footing
Yeah.
every step of the way. In fact, we didn't lose a pony, but one pony was swept off the trail. There was a small snow slide. This was the day where we got to camp late. We beat the ponies to camp because they had to go rescue this pony. Luckily, pony
Oh
was fine and
my gosh,
everything,
that's
not hurt.
tragic.
We were all, so that's the way we felt. It was, it's clear that these trails are ancient yak
Mm-hmm.
migration trails. In fact,
Yeah.
we were told that they've only been able to use ponies on this trek for the past 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Before that, it had to be yaks because the trails were too difficult for the ponies. They were very happy to get to ponies because the yaks, while they can carry a lot, ornery and pretty much go
They
wherever
are
they want.
not very nice sometimes,
So it is a challenging trail.
but very doable. And I'm curious,
Yeah, absolutely.
so you had that initial hesitation of like, am I going to be prepared for this? How did you see your fitness play out on the trails? Was there anything that you felt
Yeah.
like?
Physically, I felt great. I was definitely prepared for it. The interesting thing for me was going into the training, I had expected it to be a lot of aerobic and endurance training, right? Throw
Yep.
35 or 40 pounds on your back and go
Yep.
walk the Appalachian Trail for 9 hours and
Right.
do that over and over again. I didn't expect to add in all of the strength training that we ended up doing, and I am deeply thankful that we did.
All those squats and lunges.
Yeah, the squats, the lunges, but also just the upper body, back, and arm and shoulder work. Not because we were carrying heavy loads, but just the repetitive nature of going uphill, using the hiking poles, going downhill. I never felt during a day, even our hardest days, that I can't finish this because I'm physically not able to. So I was really thankful that we put in all that work beforehand. It enabled me to be more present.
Which is the whole point, that
Right.
you do all the work up front. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be arduous on the mountain or on the trail, but if you've put in the work ahead of time, you get so much more enjoyment and pleasure out of being there than if you're, in your head and struggling and not happy about
Right.
how you're feeling. I often would say to myself when I'm training, like, it can either be hard now or hard on the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I get to control a few things. I get to go home and sleep in my bed, and like I get to have a nice meal afterwards. It's just much easier to push yourself and make it difficult when you're in training so that when you get to the mountain, things are much more enjoyable.
Yeah, I felt exactly the same way. I had a conversation with a family member before I signed up for all this. And he said, well, look, you just got to make sure you're preparing now because you don't want to fail because you failed to prepare.
Absolutely.
And that made all the difference. Mentally, it was, you still spend so much time in your head. And which also I found a good thing. There were 3 of our group have been close friends for their whole lives. And they were chatting constantly on the trail.
I remember this, yes.
And finally at one point, one of the members of the group said, look, guys, this is great. Either go so far ahead of us that we can't hear you or go back so we can't, because we're all just trying to, in our heads.
In your own bubble.
In our own bubble. And it's really hard to do with that. So you really got to the point where you enjoyed the silence and, it was the sound of everybody breathing and whatnot. And I found myself getting into a really nice rhythm and almost a Zen state, especially on the ascents.
I think it can be very meditative. And
yes,
we've talked on this podcast before about the flow state and about how you need a little bit of challenge plus the motivation to accomplish the thing in order to create that state of Zen where you just feel like time sort of falls away and it feels effortless, even though it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I love about the mountains is being able to get into that kind of zone.
Yeah. And just being completely disconnected.
Yeah.
You're not checking your watch or your phone for a text or a headline. And, knowing that and committing to, I'm doing this. I'm not doing this for my family. I'm not doing it for the rest of the group. I'm doing this for me.
Absolutely. I think we don't I mean, maybe I'm speaking for myself, I guess. It's unusual to be in that circumstance where you get to do something really just for you that's beneficial for you, and no one else is counting on you or depending on you or expecting you to do something. You just get to show up and do something that's meaningful for you all
Yes.
day.
And doing it in a place that you've never been and that few people go to is really special.
You had some cool cultural experiences as well. I remember seeing your photos on Instagram. Like, share some of that, because I
Yeah.
think, achieving something memorable in the mountains is amazing. And obviously I'm drawn to that, but there's also so much more to learn, I think, about traveling and mountain adventure. You get to understand and experience some of the culture of a place you've never been to, and Bhutan feels like it's exceptional in that regard.
It absolutely is. I would go back to Bhutan just for some of the cultural stuff to experience more of it. We were, again, fortunate. October is a big festival month in Bhutan. So before we got to the trail, we went to the capital, Thimphu, where there's a big 3-day religious festival. And we all dressed in traditional Bhutanese garb.
I love that. That's
It
really
was
cool.
it was really comfortable, and went to temple, which is this big multi-building open air space, and spent the day with probably 5 or 6 thousand Bhutanese who were there watching this festival, and we got to
Yeah.
hear music and interact. That was special. We visited the National Museum. The one thing that really stood out for me is about a third of the way, or a little more of a third of the way through, and it was our first rest day on the trail. We were in the village of Ledi. Now, to call this a village is generous. There are probably half a dozen to a dozen actual permanent buildings in this village. It's very remote, north central Bhutan, amazing views of the Himalaya.
You just wonder how those villages survive for centuries with so
Oh,
few.
yeah, it is amazing. And it houses one of the local schools. So this is
Okay.
a kindergarten through, in American terms, you'd think of it through like sixth grade. Now, there's only 18 students in this school, and they actually go out, the headmaster and the teachers go out to the other villages, which are smaller, or to the nomadic families to recruit them to let their children come to school. And so their school year is from May 1st till November 1st. The kids and the teachers live at the school. They do all their education in English because it is a national goal to have everyone fluent in English. And these kids come from, as I said, all of these other remote villages out there. And there was one little boy he couldn't have been no more than 4. He came from a nomadic tribe. His parents were yak herders, and his dialect of the national language was sufficiently different that the teachers had to figure out how to learn his dialect, teach him the national dialect, and teach him English.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. So we got to spend about 4 or 5 hours with these students in the various classrooms, and it was magical just to watch and interact with these students whom just recently have gotten internet access. So they have solar for power, they burn wood for heat, and they have Starlink for
Okay.
internet access. They're very plugged in. We had one member of our group, the only woman who was older girls asked her if she was a TikTok model because they thought she was so beautiful, and they were great. And so one of the things that actually I'm trying to do is I spoke to the headmaster afterward, and he said, we're teaching English, but none of us are native English speakers. All of us are Bhutanese nationals.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be great if you ever knew any native English speaking teacher who might want to come spend a month with us each school year to both help teach English to our students, but also help us just improve our teaching program. So I took that back, and I'm now working with a local school here where my youngest son attended, and raised the idea with the headmaster and the teachers. And I'm hopeful we're going to have 5, 6 teachers who are interested in maybe doing this on a rotational basis each year, because it lines up with the U.S. summer vacation in terms of when
Yeah.
the school year is. The headmaster did promise that if we could make this happen, they'd arrange a helicopter to fly the teacher from Paro or Thimphu up to Leti, because if you don't, it's a 2-day drive and a 6-day hike, which I'm not sure everybody would be up for. But hopeful that we can keep that, I can get that going and keep it going in a way that is, pays back a little bit of what we have and what we're capable of doing for some pretty deserving people.
And I also love that I recently interviewed someone else on the podcast who was doing some cleanup work in Nepal. And we were talking about how it's important to not be presumptive when you go to another community or another culture and look at how we live and say, well, you should, try to mirror that for them. So I love how the headmaster approached you and said, like, these are things that could benefit our children and our community. And you so graciously stepped up to help provide those. I'm also always fascinated when I go to a school in another country and I see just how eager the children are to learn and to be involved and to be in that little community. And I'm also struck by how different the conditions are than schools in the Western world, for example, where they're living in, small rooms on bunk beds. And I know in the case of a school I visited in Nepal, they meet once a week. So it was just very, very different than what we're used to here. But the children were just so excited and eager to be there.
Right. For a lot of them, this is the only schooling they're going to get.
Yeah.
Because once they finish this school, they have the opportunity to go on if they perform well enough. But for many of them, they have to go back to their families, to their villages, because it's subsistence level farming and living. So the government is really working to increase the number of kids who are getting education, ensuring that they're educated in English, so that they can build towards kind of the future that Bhutan wants as a country, because things are changing there. I mean, for a lot of them, global warming is a real thing for them. Their glaciers are melting. Their glacial lakes are overflowing. And for many of these families who have made their living collecting mushrooms or yak herding and selling yak products, yaks can't live below the snow line. It's interesting to see kind of how these different countries are dealing with it, if we can be helpful in some way, in a way that's helpful for them, not trying to bring our experiences and our way of doing things.
I agree. Well, if you are comfortable, we can include a link to some of the work you're doing in the show notes if people want to find out more. Maybe there's teachers in other parts of the country or world that want to be a part of school.
Yeah, right now I've got my next meeting with the teachers, and I'll share as much of that back with you. I would love to it's been interesting. I've talked to some of the local business people in our community, and I live in a fairly small community, who are like, sign me up, we'll sponsor a teacher for this year. The reaction thus far has been very, very positive.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a lot to change the communities that you adventure in, which is very admirable. Thank you for doing that. And I love how it just sort of organically arose. Like, you probably have no idea or expectation.
None. Didn't know what to expect. And at every turn on this trip, it was magical.
And one of the magical things, at least from my perspective, was that you got to see a snow leopard. Two of them.
It was, we had this, our campsite was right beside a river, and we got to camp. Sun was shining. The 4 younger guys actually went in the water to bathe. I did not. I did stick my feet in, but I was not prepared to swim. And we had seen snow leopard tracks in the snow several days leading up to this. And then after the sun went down, 2 juvenile snow leopards were on the far bank watching us.
Wow.
And so we were all trying to get pictures. I got a picture. You can make him out. It's hard. And then what happened was, these Tibetan ponies that supported us, they're never tied up. They're only tied up in the morning when they're loading them up. Other than that, the ponies hike on their own, follow each other, driven by and once we get to camp and they're unloaded, they basically let these ponies go, and the ponies go off and find, because there were 2 juvenile snow leopards, the horsemen were concerned that they might try to go after a pony, because typically a solo snow leopard just focuses on the blue sheep. They don't go after the ponies. The horsemen actually went across the river, forded the river, to drive the snow leopards away so that they wouldn't be a risk to their ponies. And
you're probably all disappointed.
Yeah, it was, but it was amazing. We got to see snow leopards, we got to see blue sheep, we saw pheasant, yak, kind of all the major animals,
Yeah.
wild animals in Bhutan. And they live very much in harmony with the people. One, because there's so few people and there's no hunting. So
Mm,
there's not this learned skittishness of being around people.
right. Gosh, there's so many reasons I'd love to travel to Bhutan. It sounds like such a magical place.
Yeah, you have to.
Yes. Are there, like, I know you're still like probably processing things, but as you sort of think through your experience, are there some things that stand out to you that you learned or experienced?
One, I think I learned what I'm capable of. I
Nice.
had not done a physically arduous trip like this since I was in the Boy Scouts.
I don't think you told me that when we started working.
Yeah. And we met with all of us the 8 of us met to fly from Bangkok up to Paro. And as I met each of the 7 others, everybody kind of did their adventure resume. And my adventure resume was I was in the Boy Scouts a long time ago. So, being able to prepare, do this, the country and the culture and the people, the landscape, I don't want to say you take it for granted. You're in awe of it every
Mm-hmm.
minute, and you kind of expect that, or at least I did. What I did not expect was kind of deeply connected you got to the country, the people, and their culture, and just feeling at home and learning. One of the most powerful moments was we crossed a lot of passes. I mean, basically, as you go west to east in Bhutan, you're going up one pass down into another river valley up. It's a continuous up and down over, the 122, I think it's 122 miles, 123 miles that we actually hiked. The morning before we crossed our highest pass, they gave us each a prayer flag string and a pen and said, if you want to, write prayers, your
Yeah.
personal prayers onto the prayer flag. So each of us did that. And when we got to the top of that pass, we then tied that whole string together. So we had a very long string of prayer flags and we hung it at the top of the pass.
So special.
And yeah. And now those prayers are released into the wind
Mm-hmm.
so the gods can hear them and hopefully grant them. And then we just gathered as a group, and our guide led us in some prayer chants. And it was really powerful and emotional.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
bet.
expect to feel that deeply, and I did. So that was really wonderful.
This is one of the things I love about travel is that it can be so transformational and it forces us out of our comfort zone and out of what
Mm-hmm.
we know, and very often puts us in surprising, unexpected circumstances. And I find that those are the ones that stick with me the most, where I learn the most and understand the most about culture and people and what I'm capable of. It sounds like just a magical moment that you had and a magical trip overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And every one of our members of our group was interesting and was insightful in their own way because we had these 3 friends who they knew each other. We had a father and his son-in-law, and then 3 of us that were just singles. That was also really special that the group worked really well together. And I
Yeah.
learned so much from every single one of those individuals. And we've got a WhatsApp group, and everybody was messaging each other over, some of us over Thanksgiving, over New Year,
Yeah.
etc. So and they're all off planning their next, big thing.
Well, what's next for you, Eric? Do you have something else on
Well,
your list for
well,
2026?
so for 2026, I think it's mainly going to be some more travel, but not adventure travel. My youngest is going to Perth, Australia for his semester abroad.
Oh, great.
So we're going to go spend about a month in the UK. Traveling, I'm hoping to do some fly fishing because it's salmon season up in Scotland. I want to do that. Then we're going to go to Perth. And then I'm thinking about K2 still remains kind of an objective for me. I now know, having done this, I know what it takes to get ready and know that I think
Right.
I can get ready. So probably not 26, but maybe 27. And I'm also now just again talking to people and looking at some of the South America trips, things like Cotopaxi. I don't know whether I'd ever be capable of Aconcagua. That sits out there as an idea.
Those are all worthy objectives that I no doubt you could
Yeah,
prepare for.
I just got to get them done before there's a 7 in front of my,
I don't know. I just spoke with a client this morning, a new client. She's 76 and she's going to train for Aconcagua, not
yeah,
like a year from now.
wow.
Yeah.
There was a single woman. So we ran into 4 groups while we were on our trek, 2 singles, a woman from Alaska who retired at 55 and basically has been doing a big trek every year for the past 8 years.
Amazing.
There was a single gentleman, and then there was a group of Swiss who were actually doing it backwards. They were doing it
Okay.
east, and then one group of 2 professors from Texas who were doing a geological and earthquake related
Oh, wow. That's cool.
work. That was it. I mean, people talk about how crowded, Everest Base Camp treks
Right.
are, and you've got to do less than 100 people do Snowman a year.
Remarkable.
So if you want to do something special in a special place, do the Snowman.
Check out the Snowman Trek. Yeah. It is now on my list of things to do. I don't know when I will get there, but it will happen for sure. It just sounds
Good.
like a beautiful place. And I love going to places that are still pristine and feel untouched. I believe Bhutan limits the number of tourists that it
Yes.
allows each year. I like that commitment to preserving things as much as possible.
Yeah, and you can't go and just be a tourist there. You need, as somebody said, it's like North Korea. You need a guide. And though the guide is going to help you really get immersed in a way that I think if you
Yeah.
just were to go to somewhere on your own, you wouldn't, because it is, it's such a different place, and it has been, I don't want to say isolated. They're not overrun in any way.
Yeah. And let's keep it that way.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, anything you'd share, like if someone else is planning a big trek, what recommendations or advice would you give someone?
Well, first piece of advice is if you're thinking about it, just do it.
Yeah.
Just, pick the trip that you want, get it on the schedule so that you have that impetus and that milestone. Do the hard work up front. And if you are not, like I wasn't, an experienced trekker, get the trainer. And not just for the value of understanding the breadth of work you need to do, the different kinds of exercises, etc., but also just when you've got questions, you've got somebody knowledgeable that you can ask. And I just think anybody can do this. If you put the work into it,
Totally.
You can do it, and you will not regret putting yourself out there and doing this. Enhance your life in ways you cannot express, and you will not regret the time, the effort, and the investment that you're making in those experiences. I think one of the things I think that's really great is investing time in experience versus investing in things.
Amen. Yes. So aligned with that. Yeah. Well, I love the notion of just doing it, just book it if it's on your mind. And also you're not going to regret it. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who's been on a trip and said, I wish I hadn't done that. Wish I hadn't done that experience, because it will change your life in positive
and
way.
you can do more than you think, both physically and mentally, and you're better off for it.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for sharing your experience and story. It's
my pleasure.
A little glimpse of what it's like on the Snowman Trek, and we'll look forward to seeing what's next for you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the time that you and the other people at Alpine Athletics and also at Mountain Madness. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. So thank you.
It's our pleasure for sure. Thank you.